Good evening, you're watching the news from the Sultanate of Oman television. First, the headlines. US sends new reinforcement to Iraq and Daesh group controls governmental establishments in Al-Ramadi. At least 12 Yemenis are killed by fighting and 51 civilians wounded in Yemen's third city of Taiz. And the first National Conference for Pediatrics recommends raising specialized health service level. Those were the headlines, and now for the news in detail. An Iraqi military spokesman says reinforcements have been dispatched to Ramadi, a city now largely held by the Daesh group. The spokesman of the Joint Operations Command said that the US-led coalition was supporting Iraqi troops with painful airstrikes since late yesterday, and vowed that the militants would be pushed out of the city in the coming hours. Yesterday, the militants swept through Ramadi, the capital of Anbar province, seizing the main government headquarters and other key parts of the city. The gains marked a significant setback for the Iraqi government in its long fight to dislodge militants, who hold about a third of the country. Fighting in South Yemen killed at least 12 civilians today, the penultimate day of a fragile humanitarian ceasefire between Saudi-led forces and the Houthi rebels. The rebels shelled several neighborhoods in Yemen's third city of Taiz, killing 12 people and wounding 51. Fierce clashes overnight killed 26 rebel fighters. Houthis backed by militiamen loyal to former President Ali Abdullah Saleh, as well as 14 pro-government forces. The violence caused many to flee to neighbouring countryside from Taiz, where residents say sorely needed humanitarian aid has yet to arrive. A 5-day ceasefire between a Saudi-led coalition and Yemeni rebels went into effect on Tuesday, aimed at allowing shipments of humanitarian relief into the country after more than 6 weeks of airstrikes and ground battles. Clashes resumed Saturday in the southern port city of Aden. Heavy artillery, including tank shells, fell on the northern sector of the city, where rebels and forces loyal to exiled President Abdurrahman Mansour Hadi continue to fight over territory, including a main road giving access to central Aden. Activists say Daesh militants are advancing towards the historic city of Palmyra in central Syria, seizing an oil field and taking control of the water company on the outskirts. The advances in the Palmyra countryside were coupled with an announcement today by the Daesh group that its fighters have seized full control of Sakir Island in the Euphrates River, north of Deir al-Zur, the northeastern province divided between areas held by the group and the government. The new gain, confirmed by the Britain-based Syria Observatory for Human Rights, leaves the Deir al-Zur military airbase in the clear path of Daesh fighters. It follows days of intense clashes. Government forces and Daesh fighters began battling on the eastern edge of Palmyra on Thursday. An Egyptian court today sought the death penalty for former President Mohamed Morsi and 106 other supporters of the Muslim Brotherhood in connection with a mass jailbreak in 2011. Morsi and his fellow defendants were convicted for killing and kidnapping policemen, attacking police facilities and breaking out of jail during the 2011 uprising against Hosni Mubarak. The court, expected to make a final ruling on June 2nd, also sought capital punishment in a separate case for 16 others for conspiring with foreign militant groups against Egypt. The rulings, like all capital sentences, will be referred to Egypt's top religious authority for an opinion before any executions can take place. Morsi can appeal the verdict, although he has said the court is not legitimate, describing all legal proceedings against him as part of a staged coup. US Secretary of State John Kerry met his Chinese counterpart in Beijing today amidst simmering tensions over disputed areas of the South China Sea. Kerry's agenda is likely to be dominated by the issues of Chinese land reclamations and freedom of passage in the South China Sea, as concerns from US and Philippine officials mount that China is planning to declare an air defense and identification zone over the disputed Spratly Islands. Kerry is expected to take a tough line on the issue, with a senior State Department official saying on Wednesday that he would leave China in absolutely no doubt about Washington's commitment to ensuring freedom of navigation and flight in the South China Sea. China has been carrying out land reclamation and construction projects at 8 military outposts in the South China Sea, US Admiral Samuel Locklear told a congressional hearing last month. Indonesian authorities were busy this morning providing food to the hundreds of Rohingya and Bangladeshi migrants who were brought to shore by local fishermen during the previous day from their boat, which was drifting off the coast. The nearly 800 migrants who arrived yesterday are being sheltered in a warehouse in Langsa, off the coast of Sumatra Island. Another 100 who were rescued are now at Pangkalan Susu, while a further 600 are being housed in a shelter in Lok Sukun. 1,000 migrants have also made their way to Malaysia's Langkawi Island. The United Nations this week urged governments to fulfill an obligation to rescue those at sea and keep their borders and ports open to help vulnerable people who are in need. Nuclear talks between Iran and the P5+1 countries continued in Vienna in a bid to come up with a final draft document for resolving the Iranian nuclear program. Iran and the P5+1 have held several rounds of talks on a comprehensive nuclear accord since 2008. The talks resumed in Vienna on Thursday between the European Union and Iran, while the P5+1 joined the talks yesterday. The meeting ended in Vienna yesterday, with the talks set to continue next week. The deadline for an agreement between Iran and the P5+1 countries is June 30th. Still to come in our news bulletin. Life and opportunity in the world's biggest refugee camp in Kenya is in limbo. Welcome back to the news from the Sultanate of Oman television. To contribute in uplifting the level of health services in the field of paediatrics, Sur Hospital organised the first national conference for paediatrics, with wide participation from various governorates in the Sultanate. The conference came out with a number of recommendations in dealing with children's sickness issues and reviewing modern international developments in the field of paediatrics and mother and child care to raise health level in the society. During the conference, a number of work papers were presented in the same field. For the hundreds of thousands of Somali refugees who live in Dadaab camp, it is more than just a refugee settlement. It is a thriving economy and a place where their children can receive an education. But now Kenyan officials are threatening to close down the camp, claiming it is a security threat used by members of Al-Shabaab, Somalia's branch of Al-Qaeda. Here is a report.
Soon after dawn, Bashir Bilal sits surrounded by children chanting Quranic verses. When Bilal came to Dadaab 5 years ago, he found better educational options here than at home in Somalia, where there are few schools and those that exist are costly.
When it comes to chances, here they have a better chance of going through the Quranic schools and even going on to further education. But there, they don't have a chance. They just become farmers.
Kenya's government has hosted refugees from Somalia since 1991, when civil wars started tearing the country apart. Today, Dadaab is the world's largest refugee settlement, with over 350,000 residents. But now, Kenyan officials want the camp shut down, claiming they are a security threat used by members of Al-Shabaab, Somalia's branch of Al-Qaeda.
Don't pretend that because Dadaab is not attacked, Garissa is attacked, Nairobi, Mombasa is attacked, that this place is safe haven. No, this is the breeding ground. It's the training ground. is the transaction ground of what goes to beat Kenyans down in Nairobi.
People living in the camps are perplexed by such allegations.
And the government are saying now, and the Dabis are the place that people are just recruiting something. And it is the pain that they feel. You know, if you feel pain, you can say everything. But this place is not a place that people are just recruiting.
Despite living in temporary shelters and on food handouts, Dadaab is not a place of universal misery and hopelessness. The camp's thriving economy is worth around $25 million, according to a 2010 study commissioned by Kenya's Department of Refugee Affairs. Ali Saha, a 23-year-old university graduate, runs a cyber cafe here, but says eventually he will return home to Somalia.
I should learn so that I help my community in Somalia. Actually want to one day go back with my education. Actually, I cannot tell you it is today or maybe it's next month or maybe it's next year, but I am sure I'll one day maybe go back to Somalia and maybe take part in rebuilding my country.
But until that day comes, Ali's fate, and that of all those living in the world's largest refugee camp, remains uncertain.
And now for the general weather forecast. Clear skies with dusty winds will prevail over the Sultanate, with cloud accumulation over Hajar Mountains. Winds will be southerly to southeasterly light to moderate. Seas will be moderate to rough with a maximum wave height of 2.5 meters. This is the Sultanate of Oman television. Before we end tonight's bulletin, here are the main points once again. US sends new reinforcement to Iraq and Daesh group controls governmental and establishments in Al-Ramadi. At least 12 Yemenis are killed by fighting and 51 civilians wounded in Yemen's third city of Taiz. And the first national conference for pediatrics recommends raising specialized health service level. With that, we come to the end of tonight's news bulletin. From all of us here at the newsroom and the studios, it's good night.